What's the scariest dream you ever had? I mean, one so chilling, it stayed with you. I am not sure if this counts, but I used to get really bad sleep paralysis. I have an old wooden rocking chair in my room. One night my eyes fluttered open and I was laying on my back, with my head turned towards that chair. On that chair there was a woman crying her eyes out, staring directly at me as she pulled out her insides. Her skin was a pale grey color, and she had blonde hair. She just stared at me. I was scared shitless. I tried closing my eyes, and then I felt a pressure on my chest, common in sleep paralysis. You guessed it. She was sitting on my chest, pulling out her innards all over my chest while crying. I actually wet the bed. I was 20. I am so terribly glad I was just paralyzed the 2 times it happened to me, and I've never seen any freaky crap like that. It would give me chills having that chair in my room after that. This was more than 10 years ago, but I still remember it. Basically, I'm sitting on an empty bus, aside from the driver, holding a potato sack which contains my sister's bones. The bus just drives around while I sit there, crying. When I was around 14 years old, I started having these short reoccurring dreams of me in front of a temple, sitting cross-legged with a little girl in my lap. Everything was in black and white, and she was a small white girl wearing a white dress and had long black hair. She looked so innocent. Somehow in the dream, I knew she was slowly dying in my arms. The reason why this creeps me out a little is because I kept on having this dream, only every time I would have it again she would creep closer and closer to death. The worst part is that I had this agonizing feeling that there was something I could do about it, but I had no idea how to stop it. Eventually I had the dream where she finally died in my arms, and then the dreams stopped. I still feel like I failed her. Whoa, that made my spine tingle. You should write a short scary story about that, or something like Scary Stories You Tell in the Dark. I had a dream where my 3-year-old daughter and I were standing on a dock on a lake when she slipped off and fell in the lake. She sank like a stone. I immediately dived in after her, swimming straight down to try to catch up with her. I remember her looking up at me, reaching up to me, opening her mouth and trying to scream. I remember seeing the bubbles from her mouth drift up towards me. I was swimming downward as fast as I could, while trying to grab her arms, her pigtails, anything. I remember reaching the point where I knew that even if I reached her, I would not be able to make it to the surface. I was resolved to not let her die alone. I keep swimming down. For all my efforts, she was sinking away from me faster than I could swim toward her. I watched her slip further and further away, the image of her growing blurrier and blurrier in the murky water. And I wake up. I immediately ran to my daughter's room and pick her up and hug her. At the time, I was in the process of separating from my then wife, so to me there is no great mystery surrounding the meaning of this dream. As a father of a little girl, that would be a truly terrifying dream. Probably of the recurring dreams I have that my teeth slowly fall out. Even if I just run my tongue through them they fall out, or I pull them out I wake up scared shitless that I have no teeth. I have those too. It usually starts with a loose tooth, and when I merely touch it, it falls out. Then, I start checking my other teeth, and they pop out with little effort. I freaking hate those dreams. I had a recurring dream when I was a child. I would wander through my grandparents' house and no one would be there. There were no cars on the street, no one. But in the kitchen a blender was going at full speed. It was an incredibly ominous blender. Whoa, this post sure mixed things up a bit. I was sentenced to death by decapitation for an unspecified crime. It didn't faze me that much. I was being all macho and Braveheart and crap, right up until the point where they put my head on the block, and in that moment it suddenly became real. There was this freaking wave of absolute terror, by far the most scared I've ever been in my life. Then the blade came down, and there was nothing for a while. Next thing I remember, I was walking around this fictional town really carefully, trying to keep my head balanced on my stump. I barely ever remember my dreams, but this one was vivid as frick. Still creeps me out when I think about it. While I understand your terror, I cannot help but laugh at the thought of you tiptoeing around cautiously in order to balance your head on your stump. Had a dream where I was carrying around a large green gem. Every time I came to a choice, I'd look through the gem and it'd show me many outcomes and I'd pick which outcome I'd use. Slowly, my choices became more and more morbid. At one point I was at a crosswalk and looked through the gem and saw myself hit by a car, or slip and break my neck. I decided to try and run away from it, and every choice from then on was death or painful death. Eventually I ended up in a grey pink area that I slowly realized was just every possibility of anything that could kill me, blurry and faded. I eventually found a gun and tried to shoot myself just to end the madness, but every time I pulled the trigger, I'd see my corpse fall in front of me, but I'd still be okay. After the third attempt, I freaked out over the 3 dead me's at my feet and gave up. After a while, I remember just sitting down in a chair and slowly fading into the background of all possibilities. This sounds like the plot to a movie or something. Great dream. I mean, not great. It sounds horrible, but intriguing to think about after the fact. I used to have this dream nightmare all the time where I'd be in like this complete white emptiness, like you always see in cartoons or TV shows when they like go to another dimension or something, with my dad, who's always been a really great guy, never ever threatening or anything, etc. Anyway, we'd just be standing there and all of a sudden he'd get this look of horror on his face and point behind me and let out this terrifying scream, and I'd turn around expecting something horrible, but there was nothing. Then he'd start laughing and give me a hug and tell me he was sorry and everything's fine, etc. Then again in like 5 minutes he'd do the exact same thing, and I'd have the exact same gut-wrenching feeling as if something horrible was going to happen, but I'd turn around and there'd be nothing there. I'm 19 now and haven't had this in years, but I'll always remember it. Troll dad invades your dreams. The dream itself wasn't scary, but I have since grown scared of the feeling it produced. Let me explain. I remember being entangled in what seemed like millions of smooth, shiny wires, completely trapped. I remember the panic of being trapped set in, very remnant of claustrophobia. Then it hit me. I felt like every thought I was having was being screamed at me, but inside my own head, as if someone had turned the volume of my thoughts up full blast. It was one of the most unsettling, worst feelings I have ever had. It really is hard to explain. The thing is that once I woke up, whatever this was persisted for a while. I can best explain it through analogy. It was as if normally my thoughts are just a guy, talking calmly and quietly, but in the dream and shortly afterward it felt like this guy was screaming at me. I don't mean to say that there's a man inside my head who tells me my thoughts or anything. That's goofy. This is just my best way of explaining. It has since happened a couple times without the dream causing it, and I have yet to find out what it is or why it happens. All I know is that dream has stuck with me for over 10 years because of the unexplainable, terrifyingly awful feeling that came with it. I actually get scream days where my internal monologue is set to scream mode, just like you describe semi-frequently, once a month or so maybe, and it lasts all day. My so gets them as well, and my younger brother, so I actually assumed this was fairly common. It was actually a 2-parter, 3 if you count the dream within a dream. When I was 12, it wasn't even scary as a dream, more because of the implication. Night 1, it started out normal enough. I was walking through the desert and out of nowhere my mother shows up, desperate to tell me something. I listen, and she begs me to wake up. This is a dream. Please, open your eyes and wake up. So I did. I was confused when I actually woke up, and went back to sleep. Don't remember other dreams that night. Night 2, same premise. I was walking through the desert, but no mother to be seen. I then remember what she told me. If in a dream desert, wake up. Please, wake up. I open my eyes and wake up, in a medieval prison guarded by some sort of monsters. Naturally, I am scared, but the people in that prison were terrified, telling me this wasn't supposed to happen, and that I should please go back to sleep and wake up in my room. It took a while for me to get to sleep, being in a prison and all, and the longer it took, the more terrified they became. Eventually I went to sleep and woke up in my room, but I still wonder if that dream was trying to tell me something. That's scary and awesome at the same time. It's like you discovered a parallel universe that you weren't supposed to see. When I was sick with the flu, I had a high fever and kept having dreams of clowns sitting in the dark in my living room. There was about 4 of them all sitting on our sofa and they would just laugh menacingly at me over and over. No matter what I did, I would wake up from the dream and go back to sleep to dream of them again. It didn't help that my mother collected little clown figurines. Holy crap. Years ago I had some fever dreams of a clown digging my grave in our front yard. I woke up in the evening completely freaked and looked out the window to see my neighbor using a sledgehammer to soften up the frozen ground for some reason. I was 4. I was being chased through my elementary school campus by a knife-wielding troll, the kind that had the colorful hair and the jewel in their belly button. He was 6 feet tall and had the knife to my mother's neck. He laughed menacingly and it echoed down the hall at me and then slit her throat. He held her head in the hair, her decapitated body twitching on the ground. He dropped her head and started toward me. I turned around and ran as fast as I could. I felt a hand grasp my ankle, and I woke up. That was nearly 20 years ago. I still think about it more times than I'd like to admit. I was picturing something like the troll from Harry Potter, but those things with the colorful hair are so much creepier. B flew up my brother's butt, stung his rectum. He then proceeded to explode all over the room. This is the only dream that has ever truly stayed with me. I freaking hate it. Silly old wasp, look what you've done. Shapes chasing me, like triangles and squares and crap like that. You know, I can actually feel my chest get heavier and crap. Wake up in cold sweats. Shapes. Hanging out with my family in the living room. My brother, who has a very short buzz cut, leaves the room, saying that he's going to go shave his head with the belt sander in the garage. It made sense in the dream. A few seconds later, a fine red mist starts spraying from the ventilation duct in the ceiling, followed shortly by blood dripping from the vent and soaking through the ceiling in a line coming from the direction of the garage. My parents and I rush over to the garage and throw open the door, just in time to see my brother, whose head had gotten caught in the belt sander and most of his face sanded off, get thrown forcefully sideways by the force of the sander into the bandsaw, which quickly decapitated him, and also cut off his hand. His body kept standing, stiffly twitching, as his neck and arm stump spurted blood and sanded face bit into the dust collection system, which had been distributing the gore into the rest of the house's ventilation system. At which point I woke up in a cold sweat and had to resist the urge to call my brother at 3 in the morning to make sure he was okay. I can still remember the smell of the blood as it started misting through the vent, and that sickening, stomach sinking feeling as you know something has gone horribly wrong and you're already too late. A dream with those mother flipping weeping angels from Doctor Who. I live in an old part of London and those things are everywhere. No sleep for days. My daughter loves Doctor Who, but after she watched that episode she has had difficulty going to bed. I had a dream that Phoebe off Friends was shaving her skin off with a potato peel and laughing at me. It was so scary. I woke up sweating. I had the weirdest dream a few months ago. I was in this living room with a bunch of people, hipsterish I guess, with these old couches and rugs and an old beat up coffee table. Pretty normal room, except it was a freaking morgue. One whole wall was covered in those cabinet things they put dead people in. You know, the metal ones? Except they weren't metal. They were glass or plastic or something you could see through. The rest of the walls were bare concrete. These hipsters and I were just having a normal conversation. There were coffee cups on the table and one of them was playing with a Rubik's SP cube. At random moments in the conversation, some of the drawers on the wall would fly open and these dead people with majorly fricked up, bloody faces would join the conversation. Then the guy with the Rubik's cube was trying to fit the cube into one of the coffee cups, with a smile on his face that faded as he noticed the cube wouldn't fit, similar to a 2-year-old playing with those boxes with shapes and pegs. He threw the Rubik's cube and it bounced on the table and nailed me in the face. All of them started throwing ceramic coffee cups at me, and once those were all gone they forced me to pull out all of my hair in small handfuls. All of the drawers on the wall rushed open once I was done, and the dead people started eating my hair. It might not sound that creepy, but I woke up screaming and terrified. Don't visit Berlin. It's exactly like that. I've had nightmares that stuck with me when I awoke because of their vagueness and the fact that the grey area I can't remember is probably so dark I couldn't trick my brain into conjuring it up while I was conscious. But the crap that really haunts me is when reality is non-existent and I am trapped in pure mental seizure. Only way I could even attempt to describe it is if time flowed like scratched record. I have had a dream where me and a friend were in Nam. I watched him get hit with a bullet in the chest and then held him in my arms as he died. Bubba was my best good friend. I have a reoccurring dream where I claw into my chest with my fingernails until I can rip my heart out. Once I have my heart in my hands, I eat it and feel it still pulsing as it slides down my throat. Then I cradle the hole in my chest until I wake up. The entire dream I'm always crying and screaming, but filled with the most savage desire to eat my heart. It's so strange, and I always wake up with scratches on my chest. It gives me the shivers just thinking about it. Kalimar. I used to live in a house in an older part of town. This house had all sorts of trapdoors, secret passageways and cool crap, but I'm pretty sure it was haunted. Not only did I have some pretty creepy experiences as a kid, trapped in the basement for one, but I had some recurring dreams that I still remember to this day. 1. Started having this one when I was about 7-8. Sitting at my living room coffee table, drawing. No one is home, except my infant brother, who is sitting in a rocking swing chair in the kitchen. Then people start coming out of my basement, past my brother in the kitchen, past me, and out the front door. I have no idea who they are, but they're coming in a mass exodus from my basement. 2. Both of these dreams happened before I got trapped in my basement. Young kid again, around maybe 10 or so, adventuring around my house. Head through my kitchen, through the laundry room and carport and into my basement. When I open the door, instead of a basement floor, there is what seems like a bottomless pit below me, with ladders, going to all different levels of said pit. In a log cabin with my family, giant crazy person shoots everyone in the face with his gun except me. My family's blood and flesh splattered on my face and legs. It ends well though because Oprah comes in and guns the sucker down with a semi-automatic. This is a reoccurring dream. I walked into a room and there was very little light. On a bed, a naked body, and where its head was supposed to be there is a rather big, malformed lump of flesh. It moves all disorderly with each breath and I notice hairs growing from it vaguely resembling a hairline. At the top of this pile of tissue and bulbous features, viscous liquid coming out of an orifice. Mouth and nose of their exits somewhere inside that hole. This person breathes through this, and at the same time salivates in this cavity. The smell of stale saliva, mucus, urine and feces is unbearable, which each breath, bubbles followed by a gurgling guttural noise almost hinting at the existence of vocal cords. I sit next to this body and somehow I know this is my father and that he is suffering greatly. All I can do is scream until I wake up. Ugh. I can certainly relate that in dreams there are things you just know, even though they wouldn't make sense in waking life. And I've had plenty of dreams like yours where someone you know is suffering, but there's nothing you can do to help them. Last night, I dreamt that I was baking cakes for some Scientologists. Nice try, Tom Cruise. I went to get some water from the kitchen in the middle of the night. When I came back, Lord Voldemort was gleefully jumping on my bed. This made me lol at work. I think the description of gleefully and just the overall image is what got me. Lying in my bed looking at my curtains, as I tend to do when I'm trying to get to sleep, so I believed I was awake, when I hear something walk into my room and slide its hand under my duvet from the bottom of my bed. It wrapped its hand around my ankle and started to drag me from the bed. I screamed so loud in the dream I woke up screaming in real life. I probably shouldn't have watched The Fourth Kind right before I went to bed, and my parents waited until the next morning to say, "Oh, thought I heard you shouting last night." Nice to know they'll rush to help if anything serious happens. I had this dream at 7 years old. My whole class were in the assembly hall. Then principal came to the stage and announced something, walked out and closed the door without anyone fully understanding what he meant. Then the Rugrats came in through the main door and stood there while we all looked at them. They then turned a sickly blue and stretched to about in proportionate 8 feet bodies making a sound that I can't describe but had the same effect on me as rubbing polystyrene or scratching a chalkboard. They then chased us. Walking their steps were huge, and anytime they touched anyone they too would stretch. They got to everyone as we just panicked and ran round the room starting with people I knew the least. When my best friend was turned they all stopped and looked at me in the corner. Tommy, Rugrats Tommy, then reached for me and I woke up. When I was a child, like 10 or 11, I had the weirdest nightmare of my lifetime. My father, who is not violent at all in real life, Killed my mother with a broken beer bottle. The blood went all over the floor, soaking the ground, and then promptly mutated into an enormous roll of red licorice. It had the mouth of a shark and tiny wee legs, and it chased my father around the house for ages, eventually catching him and ripping him to pieces. Safe to say, I never touched red licorice again. Your spelling of licorice as licorice makes me want to be able to buy boozy licorice. I was walking through a wasteland. Think Fallout, but this was long before Fallout existed, and there was a dark green hue over everything. But matter of fact, there was not much other color apart from black. I was with people, but I didn't know who they were. There were two of them. We went into a destroyed building and walked into a room. You could tell that there were once large floor-to-ceiling windows. There was now just the twisted window framework. In front of the framework, crouched down, was a person with their back to me, seemingly looking out the window hole. I walked up to them and felt that I knew them. I was starting to feel happiness and relief that I had found this person. Everything was in slow motion as I reached out to touch their shoulder. Not super slow, but like I was in water. The second I touched their shoulder, everything sped up to normal speed and the person spun around, looking me right in the eye, with their eye, an eye that, instead of having a pupil or iris or even whites, had a spider, a freaking black spider, surrounded by green where the whites would be. I jumped back and woke up with a yelp, breathing heavily. I realized that the person was my sister. This dream has vividly remained in my memory for nearly 20 years. Sleep freaking paralysis. I've had the generic terrifying spider monster clown dream. Those go away in a day for me. The one that really stuck with me the most was a dream I had about my grandpa dying in the hospital bed, then going to his funeral. The dream was heart-wrenching, but the worst part was I knew it would be a reality for me soon enough. He passed away about a year later, and it was like the nightmare came true. I was walking down the hallway in the house I grew up in. I get to my parents' room and the door is closed. I know something isn't right and I shouldn't go in. I open the door anyway and step in. I look around and no one is there. Then I hear it. "We are with you. We are with you," over and over again in a demonic lady voice. I'll never forget that one. Good golly, I just got chills reading this. I have a lot of apocalypse dreams, probably because I am a prepper. I wish I could recount them all. Aliens are always at the top. Super volcanoes, coronal mass ejections, zombies, virus. I have crazy end of world dreams every night. They are not exactly nightmares. I look at them as a way to prep. I wish I could have those. I had a nightmare during my lucid dreaming years. You can't control it and you remember everything. Needless to say, I died in every painful way possible. Everything would be dark at first. Then I'd notice that my hair was covering my eyes because there were strands floating above my face in the water. By the time I realized I was underwater, I couldn't do anything, and my mom would grab me violently and suddenly, which seemed to wake me up. This was a recurring dream and I was honestly convinced my mom wanted to kill me for years. My parents sold me to another family. When I was about 6 or 7, I had a very vivid dream that I was sitting in my mom's old Expedition in my elementary school's parking lot, with all of the windows rolled down. I was strapped into my car seat, and my mom was off talking with two adults I didn't recognize on the farthest end of the parking lot, so she was well enough away not to hear. On the other side of the parking lot, close to me, was a small stone wall. In real life, there is a taller, brick wall separating the school and the neighboring houses. In my dream, past the much shorter wall, was this vast valley. The grass was so green, and so alive, and there were dozens of sheep grazing and milling about. For some reason, there was this horribly vicious wolf pacing alongside the wall, on the valley side. In the dream, I knew that it was meant to be protecting or perhaps guarding the sheep. In the dream, this made complete sense to me, so I'm just sitting in this car, just waiting, sitting, for something, and then suddenly the wolf jumps over the brick wall and starts running toward the van at this impossible speed, and I tear my eyes away from it and look over to where my mom and her two associates were, but she wasn't paying any attention. I turned back to see the wolf jump in through the window, in the back seat. It then started tearing into my side, around my abdomen and ribs. I couldn't feel a thing. but I could see my own insides and blood, and it was completely silent, and I wasn't even trying to scream. I was just paralyzed. Then I woke up. That dream has stuck with me for years. A few years ago, I dreamt that my ex died. I'm very afraid of spiders. I dreamed he got bitten by a spider and died. I woke up in tears and called him at 5:30 am to make sure he was still alive. I still remember it vividly. It sucked. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.